yeah, that would tear me up.
I know Wendy's mom held out hope for a long time. But yeah, we all hoped that she was still alive. We all hoped she was going to make it home.
2 years after Jesse's murder and Wendy's disappearance, Patty Lumpkin is in Quantico, Virginia, attending a coveted 3-month training program with the FBI.
The privilege of that was great because less than 1% of law enforcement in the United States have that opportunity to attend that academy.
Little does she know that her effort to become a better cop will blow her unsolved homicide case wide open. Lumpkin hears from officers attending the course about a murderer on the loose in Texas.
I became aware that they were looking for someone that was dubbed the Railway Killer, the Angel of Death. He was killing people and either leaving them near the railroad or he was killing them at homes or locations that were close to the railroad.
The FBI believes the Railway Killer's real name is Ángel Resendez, charged years earlier for a rash of burglaries across the U.S. But more recently, police had matched his fingerprint to one of a slew of murders, all with the same grisly signature.
Most of the victims were bludgeoned to death. It was blunt force trauma.
That MO is so strikingly similar to that of Jesse's ruthless killer. Lumpkin has the growing sense she's onto something.
They're looking for him out in the West. We're in the South. But remembering that the possibility of the mobility of the train, you know, what's the chance?
Could Resendez be the man for whom they've been desperately searching for years? Lumpkin and Owens quickly head to Texas, the site of the Railway Killer's most recent attacks.
They were having a meeting to discuss the possibility that this person of interest was involved in a serial crime spree around the country.
And he's a difficult killer to catch, according to profiler Mark Young.
We knew Ángel Resendez was a person that rode the rails across the country. We were worried about where he was going to strike next. So we had made the decision early on that he needed to be made a top 10 fugitive. You know, these millions of eyes from the public would tell us something.
The strategy works, and Resendez is apprehended along the Mexico-Texas border. He is charged and convicted of one gruesome killing, and he's the #1 suspect in dozens of others.
He was one of the most vile, evil persons that I had dealt with. It was like every time you turn around, here's another murder.
Might Jesse Howells be one of them? Was Resendez responsible for Jesse's death and Wendy's disappearance? Owen and Lumpkin want to interview him and find out.
So to be able to talk to him in person, you can sit one-on-one with him and you can look him in the eye and hope that he will give you that information.
But there's a problem, and it's a big one.
The attorneys representing him at the time in Texas stopped us. They wanted to protect their client from talking, and any defense attorney who represents a criminal will generally tell the person, stop talking to law enforcement.
And with Resendez on death row, the investigators know they're quickly running out of time.
The state of Texas historically has a pretty fast-moving execution rate. So we were concerned that Resendez would be put to death before we resolved our case.
That's when Lumpkin and Owens hit upon an idea.
We contacted some folks in Houston and asked them what opportunity we might have to communicate with Resendez in jail by letter.
He gravitated towards females more than he did the males, from what the detectives out there were telling us. So I wrote the letter. We
treated him respectfully in the way we wrote the letter. We even referred to him as Senor instead of Mr., because that's appropriate for someone from Mexico. We just laid it out. We have a case that's open where we have a young man that was killed. He was traveling with his girlfriend, and we never found her.
And we just bluntly asked him, was he involved in the cases? Did he know what happened?
And much to our surprise, he responded.
Marion County Police are in a hurry to meet with Angel Resendez, the man they believe is responsible for the Florida murder of Jesse Howell and the disappearance of his girlfriend, Wendy.
He was on a path to a death penalty in Texas.
We didn't have a lot of time.
Given the court order preventing them from meeting with the so-called railway killer, investigators write Resendez, hoping he'll come clean on the crime.
And much to our surprise, he responded by saying he knew all about it. As a matter of fact, he was quick to admit that he was the one responsible for killing Jesse.
It is a shocking admission. Can they trust Resendez to be telling them the truth?
There have been cases in the past where people falsely confess to a crime. One of the ways to prevent that is not to release all information. One of the most crucial and important aspects of this case was that we had never talked about the murder weapon.
Can Angel Resendez provide police with the information only the killer could know?
He described the brake coupling that he had hit Jesse in the head with. He knew that. We knew absolutely at that point we hit the target.
The investigators are elated. Though they have yet to meet Resendez face-to-face, they are confident they have found Jesse's killer. But what about Wendy? Does he know what happened to her?
We need to be able to sit down one-on-one with him, to talk with him and find out, is he going to talk to us? Is he going to tell us what happened?
To be certain he's not lying to them, the investigators are prepared to offer Resendez a deal. But first, the heartbreaking task of asking Wendy and Jesse's parents to agree to it.
At that point, we went to the families and we said, may we give this killer immunity from prosecution in Florida if he agrees to talk to us.
It is not an easy question to ask a family. Okay, we're going to give this person a pass if they tell us what happened. But the long and short of that was that he was going to be executed in Texas. And to be able to give some closure, they agreed to that.
To investigators' relief, so does Angel Resendez.
As twisted as it may sound, he might have been proud of some of what he did. It was another veiled attempt to earn a little more infamy, make himself feel famous. Would we take advantage of that to get him to talk? Sure we would.
Lumpkin and Owens head to death row in Texas for one of the most difficult interviews of their careers.
Pressure was great because we knew that this was our one shot. If we didn't do it right, we would never know what happened.
The entire case is basically hinging on what he's able to provide.
When we get to the prison, we see him coming down the hallway. He has a waist belt on that's an electric shock belt, and he's chained to the belt.
All for what appears to be just a regular guy.
He's just a mild-mannered person, but remembering, too, that a psychopath or a sociopath doesn't have any feeling. I mean, he had dead eyes. He had no feeling in that body. He didn't care about anything.
Resendez tells investigators that he was heading south to find work when he met the runaway couple on a grain car. When the freight train stopped and Jesse got off to smoke a cigarette,
Resendez told us that he killed Jesse with a piece of the train coupling. And that Wendy was, I believe, asleep on the train when this took place. And then when they went down the road further, somehow he talked Wendy into getting off the train.
He claims he strangled Wendy to death, then dragged her lifeless body into the bushes.
He talked about covering her body with a army-style jacket. He talked about a book that she had been carrying in her backpack. You got to remember, this was 3.5 years prior to this interview, and he so vividly recalled so many of these details. It was sort of spooky.
But is he simply leading on the investigators?
There was a great chance that even though Resendez told us where he left Jesse, that he was lying about Wendy.
There's only one way to find out.
While we were sitting there during our interview with Resendez, we asked him, would he draw us a more detailed map? On the map, he drew where the bodies were. He drew where Wendy's body was.
After confessing that he'd murdered Jesse Howell and his girlfriend Wendy, Ángel Resendez, known as the Railway Killer, has drawn police a map of what he claims is the location of the 16-year-old girl's body. But investigators are leery.
We didn't know if it was going to lead to us discovering her remains.
And not only could he be lying, but he could maybe not know exactly where he did leave her.
3.5 years after Wendy went missing, police returned to the railway tracks in search of her body. Using Resendez's map, investigators travel an hour's drive south from the site of Jesse Howell's murder.
We'd gone down the tracks a pretty good distance when you could see, based on the description that Resendez had provided, of this big cluster of trees like a canopy, and there was a white farmhouse close by.
And we had a big team ready on the ground, and we had some very highly trained dogs to help us.
Very shortly after the dogs began their search, that they found a campsite.
During the interview at death row, Resendez talked about the book. The book was there. We talked about the jacket, the big heavy Army-style overcoat. It was there. All of these things were there.
And police don't have to dig very deep to find Wendy's body.
It does break your heart because you know that she is somebody's loved one. She's not just a young girl, she's somebody's loved one. She had a future. Now she doesn't have a future. So it's not a good conclusion, but it's the right conclusion to find for the family.
We were grateful for the relief that Wendy's parents would be able to go through now. We knew they would finally be able to grieve their daughter and move on with their lives.
When Wendy ran away, she had a small engagement ring, and she had a Winnie the Pooh wristwatch. During the excavation of the remains and the processing of the crime scene, the ring and a Winnie the Pooh watch were located, and I brought those back to Woodstock and gave those to Wendy's parents.
Jesse had this, it was just a little like pewter cross that he wore all the time. And it was actually on his body when he was found dead. And his mom gave it to me, and I still have it to this day. And it's just one of those small reminders, you know, of, you know, to be aware of the decisions I make in my life.
There will never be closure. There's no such thing as closure. It's always going to hurt. Every March 23rd, I'm going to cry. But it's huge to know that it's done, so that you can at least say it's done and move on.
In the years following, federal agents continue their investigation into the Railway Killer. They discover a bloody trail of no less than 15 brutal murders throughout the United States.